I guess I'll kind of start here, and these guys will correct me as I go, as is their wont. And thankfully they do. It's really good that they do, because you can always go down a bad rabbit trail occasionally. Upon the death of Glenn Lord several years ago, we were allowed access to his collection for the first time. And out of that came the Typescripts, and out of that came some very interesting stories for us. All kinds of things we learned about Bob and how he did things and how other people did things, and led to some really interesting results that we'll no doubt be arguing about and having our detective kind of trying to figure out what the heck that means for years and years to come. And that's great. So talking about what Bob did. Bob would type stories. He started out, of course, handwriting stories when he was young. At some point, he got his first typewriter in 1922. Had it for a year and a half, 2 years.
3 years.
3 years. See,
I'm correcting him.
I know. Einstein famously said, he was talking to a class of students, he said, don't bother remembering anything that's written down. That's wasting your mental powers. You should be doing more creative stuff. So I'm the master of lists. I don't remember anything. I write everything down. But he only had it for a few years. He got a second typewriter in 25,
sometime between July 7 and July 16, 1925.
So we have it down to about a week, and we know these things. How do you know this stuff? Well, he was good enough to include it in some letters to his buddy Tevis Clyde Smith. He said, hey, look, I got a new typewriter. And then on the second one again, he said, hey, look, I got a new typewriter. He never said that again anywhere else. He never said anything like that ever again. And based on all the research we have done now and the stuff we have seen, we're pretty confident those are the two. He had the first typewriter, it was a little older, it was a little beat up. Once he got the new one, he stayed with it forever and never got another one, never changed it out, never did anything with it, just used the same one. And there's a long story about how we know that, and we won't go into that. But unless you want to, we will at some point. But I don't know how many hours we have to play here. But if you want to jump in, jump in.
You're doing well.
So one of the...
Just a question. When you say that you have this letter that he wrote to his friend, did he do carbons? And so he kept the carbon of the buddy that had the letter?
Excellent question. No. It turns out that Howard was a very big correspondent, wrote to a lot of people. Most of those people threw away those letters. Tevis Clyde Smith actually kept all the letters. And if Bob had known he was going to keep them for posterity, he would never have written that stuff he wrote in there. Oh my gosh. He wrote some horrible stuff in there. That if he'd have known that it was going to be republished, he would never have done it. But Tevis kept all his papers. He tried to sell them once or twice, didn't get them sold, ended up giving them to his cousin or nephew or somebody. Nephew. And then that person in turn gave them to Texas A&M University, to the Rare Book Library. So they have the Tevis Clyde Smith collection, which has this enormous mass of letters from Bob, along about 300 pages of letters, along with all sorts of school memorabilia, old school newspapers that Bob had written in, some of their amateur journal stuff they had done, all sorts of interesting things. If you ever get bored, it's a great day trip to call ahead, go down there and go look through the stuff. It's just fascinating. If it was not for the Tevis Clyde Smith collection, there is so much that we would not know and that we would be having a much harder time figuring out. It was so helpful when Bob dates when he did things. That makes life a lot easier for all of us and the things we do, looking at his letters. Bob did not keep an index of everything he wrote. He did not say, I have now completed this story, here's the title I give it, it's 42 pages, and here's my file copy that I'm going to keep for posterity. Okay, he didn't do that. He would write something, and early on especially, he would write something and he would send it in. He quickly figured out that was a bad choice.
He didn't prepare a carbon.
He didn't prepare carbon. Yeah. And he learned it was Wolf's Head?
Wolf's Head.
When he sent in Wolf's Head, the editor wrote back and said, great story, love the story. Hey, the artist lost the typescript. Could you send me your carbon? And so he had to sit down and retype the entire story from memory.
He said, sure, I will send it in 2 days from now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he had no carbon. So what he did, he retyped the story from memory.
Yeah, from complete memory. So who knows how accurately it matched the original, actually. It's probably better.
But they found the original back, except the first page.
Oh,
so we had the original story except the first page.
You ever done a crisscross?
But he had this great memory, he could retype something, just like that.
Yeah, his friend said he had an eidetic memory, so he could do stuff like that. But he figured out it'd be a lot easier to keep carbons. So it's I did it, thank you. And so he started making carbons of things, which is very helpful because a lot of times when you get to a final draft, he would send that in but still have the carbon. And so that helps us because when we do the publishing of the Howard stuff, and we want it the way Howard wrote it. Well, and what we found when we started looking at these things and looking at how the pulp editors edited stuff, some editors barely touched stuff. Farnsworth Wright,
Not much.
he'd leave the misspellings, he'd leave everything. But some editors like Jack Byrne,
Wright did some minor editing on everything what was too hot or spicy for the time, so he would censor.
knock it down a bit. Yeah.
Outre dialogue.
And then
Outre is French, right?
But
Yeah.
and who was the guy that loved to insert extra lines?
Oh, that's the Jack Byrne.
Jack Byrne. He did some of those Breck Elkin or funny Western style stories, and he would decide I can make this story better. And he would start taking out things and adding lines and restructuring things and get kind of crazy with it.
Yep.
El Sprague-de-Camp famously would with a story that's a Conan story that's already been published, he'd leave it alone just like it was. He wouldn't hardly touch it. Maybe put in a sentence or two to get his continuation thing in it. But if it was a story that had not been published, he'd go crazy. Have a great time rewriting it. So
bring it back.
I'll bring it back to. So Bob, so what did Bob keep? Well, Bob had Bob's raw material costs was paper and ribbon, right? I mean, typewriter, ribbon, paper, and postage. That's his cost. And so Bob had figured out early on, well, this paper has two sides. And so once you finish a draft, once you get, once you finish a draft, you go on to a later draft. And Bob would go through multiple drafts we found. Sprague-de-Camp, I think, was the one that made a comment about, Bob would just whip these things off in one pass because Bob made a comment in a letter once to somebody bragging about how he did it. In fact, that wasn't true. We've got examples where there's like at least 9 partial drafts. And there's lots of them where it goes 2 or 3 or 4 that we'd find. Each time usually starting small and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, those early drafts now, once they're done, he doesn't need them anymore. A lot of times he would take those, flip them over, and use the backside to write another draft of another story on. Okay? And then eventually at some point, I guess he'd just throw them away. Or, maybe he'd let them pile up for a while. But at some point, so you figure when Bob died, he probably ended up with stories that were finished and ready to sell that just hadn't gotten sold yet. Stories that were works in progress. And there were early drafts or not completed or whatever. And then a stack of things that was the leftover stuff he's using to retype on. That he's using the back of. That seemed about right, probably?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when Dr. Howard went in the day after Bob died, he went in to kind of sort through the papers to get them together to send off to Klein, the agent. Kate Merriman in an interview said, because she was interviewed by Sprague-de-Camp, and that particular interview is not published, but you can see it down at the Harry Ransom Center. She said, there was just paper everywhere in that room. And I don't know if that meant Bob just had it in piles that kind of went around the room, or if it just he just scattered it. I don't know. And so at some point, she and Dr. Howard spent a day or two trying to sort out all the stories and get them sorted out and find what they could find. They could bundle up and ship off, and who knows what they sent. Off it went. And they didn't write down what they found or what they sent. We know that we've got correspondence that says they sent a bunch of stuff, Klein took some of it, sent a bunch of it back. Now we know what Klein had at one point, because he was good enough to keep logs.
Except a lot of that was 150 pages of poetry.
Yeah.
Some of that, we don't know
and some
what
of
it was.
his logs were like, he had some where he had lists of stories. And there's stories like, what is it? 3 wrong, no one needs 3 hands. 2 wrongs don't make a right. WRIGHT. I have no idea. And there must be 50, 100. I don't know how many stories he had lists of that we've never seen, we've never heard of. They're gone. The poetry is even worse. I mean, there's an enormous list of poetry, and we have no idea where it went. It just, it's gone. Okay, it got lost somewhere in the shuffle. I believe Doc Howard said once, we accidentally burned a bunch of poetry. He was cleaning out the house and didn't realize it and threw some out. But in any case, there was a little batch that went off this way, and then Doc Howard had the rest of it. When he died, it all went in a box and went off to Ed Price in California. We don't know what was in that box. Okay, we have no idea. Off it went to California. Ed Price started passing around among a bunch of his friends, so it started scattering again. At some point, Glenn Lord shows up and says, I want all of that. And it took him years to get these guys to pull it together, had to buy it in discrete bundles, cost him his own money, pulled it all in, put together, tried to get it all back together. Did he get it all? I don't know. Maybe. Got what he could get, right? Got that back together. He also, called the agency and said, let's get all that stuff back from the agency too, and he got that stuff back. Now, everybody up to Glenn, when they wanted to sell a story, they would send in the original typescript. And when this pulp or whoever, or the magazine was done with it, they'd wad it up and throw it away. Okay? So those are gone. Okay? We don't have those originals anymore. So it's one of the reasons it's really rare to see an entire story typescript for sale. Because the only time they turn up is when either Bob sends somebody a draft because they asked for a draft of something, and you send them a draft, or Pulp would shut down before they got to publish it, and so they still had it in their files. And I think that's kind of it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I hope you're catching the sort of the line that trails through all this is we have no idea. Okay. So then it gets to Glenn. Glenn gets everything. According to Luann, it took him about a year to sort it out, put it in a nice row, have it all done. He didn't write down a list. Because he was another guy that had a big memory and was proud of his memory. And she said you could ask him for anything. And he could just walk over, pick it right out, hand it to you. That's great. But he never, ever, he kept all his correspondence. He kept very detailed notes about agency stuff he needed to keep track of. He never wrote down, what do I have in typescripts? Or what he had in his collection, ever. He has an enormous collection. It's just gigantic. It's got to be 100,000 items. It's just incredible. Never wrote it down anything. And I mean, I wrote down my collection one time years ago. It took me days. I only have like 1,000 things. I mean, I have a little collection compared to these guys. Or some of the other people here have huge collections.
Not a big collection.
I mean, it's just mind-numbing how big it is. And so when we got to see it, we had no idea what we'd see and what would we learn. And so we can tell you about some of the stuff we learned, some of the stuff we saw. That kind of cover the basics there?
Yeah, I think you did a fine job.
Yeah.
These guys give me a
questions?
lot of coaching. Any questions,
questions?
up to that point? Yeah.
Have you gone all the way through the collection, or have you only seen part of it?
I've seen the whole collection. I've been through all of it, at least once or twice. So. And as a lot of people know, the typescripts that were pulled out were all sent to the Harry Ransom Center for safekeeping. So now they're actually properly cared for, and everybody, they'll be there forever. Anybody wants to go see them.
What year did Lord go out search for this stuff?
Would have
It's in
been
the 60s.
starting in the early, like 61 is when he started. I believe he said 60 or 61. Is that right?
A bit before, because he went poem hunting.
Oh, yeah.
Before that, so and when Always Comes Evening came out, he had already been chasing stuff. He knew there was stuff in California, trying to track it down. Took him. He got the first batch in 1966, if I remember, and the last one from Price was 1972. So it took him 6 years to get all those together.
Yeah, it was a challenge to work that out of him. So. And he also found other odds and ends too here and there. He was the original Howard detective by far. I mean, he was the first one to come to Cross Plains. He and Luann would crawl through people's attics looking for stuff. He'd go shake hands with everybody that knew Bob and ask him for stuff and see what he could find. So he found more letters. He'd get copies of the Junto, these old amateur magazines they do.
Everything. I mean, if it wasn't for Glenn, we would have no letters between Bob Harron and Lovecraft. We would have no Cormac McCart stories. We would have 2 Carol stories instead of 13. Mm-hmm. We would like Veil of Lost Women, but that wouldn't be so bad. I mean, no Agnes, Dark Agnes. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have, all those books we have. If it weren't for Glenn, we wouldn't have anything. So we have to realize that we owe Glenn so much.
All the letters from Harold Priest and
the letters, yes.
Items from the Junto, all that stuff would have been lost.
Just incredible.
Yeah, amazing man. He keeps kicking himself off. I don't know why he's doing that.
It doesn't like
When
you.
Dr. Howard sent all this stuff to editors after Bob's death, was there a significance to the fact that Bob was now dead? In their mind, of the value of his writings?
No. Bob, you got to remember, Bob was a contemporary writer. He was a successful pulp writer. He was the highest paid guy in town. But there were bigger stars out there. There was Edgar Rice Burroughs. There was who did the goofy detective.
Seabury
Seabury
Quinn.
Quinn. That, you know, there was Lovecraft was still around. There were other people who were bigger stars. And a lot of people were already predicting the death of the pulp, and the science fiction things were rising, this fancy stuff's going to go away. And so nobody had a feel for, oh, this paper is valuable, oh, these stories are important. They just went, and just shut. Everybody that touched them until it got to Glenn didn't care. Just incessantly didn't care. It's just so frustrating.
This might be a stupid question, but is the Post Oaks typescript in that collection? And is it titled?
There are two of them, and neither one has a title.
Neither one has a title.
The title comes from Tevis Clyde Smith, who recalled that Bob had written something and was going to give it that title.
You will find there's a lot of titles out there that have a really interesting story behind them, and it's not that Bob gave it that title. There's lots of those.
If I'm in the Klein papers, there's a list of the stories he retained in 1936, and in there is what I suppose is the original title for Post Oaks and Sandrout, which is Clutches at the Fringe, in which you have, and I'm pretty sure that's the title because it matches.
What's it?
Page
Clutchers,
numbers.
yeah, page numbers,
And that
we
works
have
as a title, yeah.
and we have page numbers. Clutchers at the Fringe,
like
a clutch.
Clutchers at the Fringe.
At the fringe?
Yeah, that's one we
Graspers at the edge.
something like that.
Something like that. That already been taken. Somebody else had it. Go think you did.
And so that is probably lost because many stories from the Klein files went missing. Glenn did rescue 18 or 19 of those, but many were lost in between. And so unless they turn up one of these days, which I don't think is likely, but who knows.
Yeah.
So we are lacking lots of final drafts. You know, the Cole stories, for example, by this XI rule, we only have a draft. The draft we're on is one with annotations and penciled in annotations, but we don't have the final draft of that. And many of those we only have carbon, Skull of Silence, and forget the title of the others. So we only have, you know, so copies, either drafts or carbons, but not the real final draft.
And we'll show you some of the stuff. You might be saying, well, how do you know something's a final? And we'll show you that. We can show you some of that stuff.
There was another question.
Yeah.
Someone was, Bobby?
Did Glenn get anything out of the Arkham House archives? I know they were divesting at some point after he left.
It did write to August Derleth early on, but Derleth wouldn't say exactly what he had. So it was, you know, piecemeal, just like Tevis Clyde Smith, by the way. And so it took him years to get stuff. And in the end, he didn't get everything because, you know, there were pictures that Indy found a few years back, and they were in Derleth's collection, and he didn't get those.
Yeah.
And Derleth didn't tell him about those. So he did get one thing from Derleth. That was the Herbert Jenkins edition of the Gen for Bear Creek. He bought that from Derleth for $4. Good deal.
I thought so. It's a good deal. So, I mean, you may be wondering what's flipping around the screen up here. This is my online collection.
Can you show a typescript and I show how I can
Yeah.
date it?
Yeah.
That would be funny.
That's a good idea.
Here you go.
I love this
Here's something fun.
Another one, a regular one.
Oh, well, okay. Let me pick you one here. Let me start flipping through. You find something you like. Come on.
You should just, you know, advance.
I
Just,
am.
yeah.
Here we go.
Another one with dialogue.
Just let me know if you
Dialogue.
find something.
Find some dialogue.
Oh, you want the quote thing?
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's a good question. May not be in this stack. Let's see. I bet it's not in this stack. This is letters. This is letters and stuff. Let's see if we get one here. Here we go. There you go.
Okay.
There it is. Point at the tape right there. It says "Take the jewels."
Ruler.
Bigger.
Here we go.
Can you make it bigger? Okay.
Yeah.
Take the jewels. So this is Conan. Which story is that?
Come on, take the jewels. The heart of the god. Blah blah blah. Give them all into the hands of the
No
director
one?
of Stygian.
Well, that should be a
Kill-
contest.
Come on. And sees the foreign the guy Conan and flame alive in the great square.
Okay, here is a hint.
Oh my god.
Jewels.
Jewels.
Good Macri.
Yeah.
Jewels of Galore. Teeth of Galore. Okay,
Serves a bit.
look at that. Paul was telling you earlier about, we know that Bob Hartket is a second typewriter from 1925 to 1936. How do we know that? First, we have a letter from Doc Hart who says, oh, my son he kept his battered typewriter for 13 years. And that was in 1938. So 1938 minus 13 is 1925. So we know that. And look at that, this small crescent here. And I first discovered that in, wow, a long time ago. Anyway, I had hair, I think, so that was a long time ago. And here, if you see this crescent, you will see that it's just below the quotation mark. And this started to appear in the typescript somewhere around March or April 1928. And it's very faint at the beginning, and by mid-1929, it's prevalent. You see every single page, Bob hard type, as this, under a quotation mark. And that's actually the top of the question mark, which for whatever reason, he was working on Underwood number 5. And his machine had a problem. And so you see that. So when you see a hard typescript and you see that thing, you know that Bob typed it on his machine. And this appeared until, right until he died, until 1936. So we know for a fact that this typewriter lasted from 1925 to 1936. After which the typewriter
It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
We don't need to worry about that.
And there's more to see here. You know, and I got the opportunity to talk to the world's greatest living typewriter authority, who gave me an education, and it was
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay, second greatest. And who talked about, you know, the way it works with typewriters. He do a lot of work for the FBI, forensics for the FBI, and he said, you know, what you look for is keys get damaged over time, and they start getting dings and twists and turns, and you look for consistent damage. Okay, and it turns out Bob's second typewriter has a list of about 8 tells that'll give it away every time. There are certain things that are erased, or the most obvious one by far, and I can blow it, I don't know if I can blow it back up here to see it or not. The blow one up here. Blow it up here. Come on, open up. If you look at that T right there, and this T and that T, you see how it comes around and goes straight up? A proper T in this typeset is supposed to be a nice pretty U at the bottom. Okay, and you'll see those all the time, nice pretty U. About 1 year after Bob got his typewriter, and this is going by, you can look at the dated letters to pick out the years. About 1 year after Bob got his typewriter, that started showing up. And it's because when he was typing fast, the T came up and struck another key, and it tore the bottom of that thing a little bit. Okay, that's a really obvious tell. The drop A is another real obvious tell. There's a whole string of these, and this helps a lot because with the stories, this was really straightforward, and you could real quickly, and you can tell the age of the paper. It's kind of brown and old, and looks kind of older. So you can tell when somebody retyped a story. You can immediately spot the difference. If you get bored after this, go to the library and pull out, there's a couple of those typescripts that there's 2 versions of them, and one is the original and one is the client agency retype. And when you look at the client agency retype, wow, is it pretty. The lines are straight as can be. There's no up and down in the letters. There's no damage in the keys. They also, and we can talk about the margins, you know. Bob had a certain style to how he wrote his drafts.
You can see that there's something typed on the back of the page here.
Yeah, you can see the back, right?
I call this backdraft, by the way. And you can see
Copyright.
here. Backdraft.
Copyright. Trademark.
You see, he typed the T here, and then he made a mistake, and so you can see he scratched his page. All of that's word processes these days. And we have stories in which he changed the name of the characters, Costigan stories mostly, and he would go through the whole typescript, erase, scratch with whatever, the name that was written in there, and replace that with a new name. Can you imagine the time it took him to do that?
Yeah.
Some of us remember the old typewriter days where you had to take that really, really rough circular eraser and really grind on the page. So yeah, that would definitely be.
And we've got examples where the client agency did that, where they took a story that they were going to turn into from a Costigan to a Dorgan, and they would, you know, get after it and start changing everything.
Did Howard repair his typewriter? Because I mean, he typed millions of words on one typewriter.
And there were stories that are told about when Doc Howard, you know, after Bob died, Doc Howard wanted to type letters to people to talk about things, and he said it was such a crappy typewriter. It was so beat up and it was so worn down and it was so terrible that he had to go get another one, you know.
No, he didn't type anything on Bob's typewriter.
Yeah.
It was on his own typewriter.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, and the repair was, there was two ways to repair it. I mean, you could always try to bend things back a little. If keys started sticking, you could pull them apart a little bit to fix that. But going in and trying to touch up the typeface, that's really hard to do. And normally what you do is, I let the expert explain to me, you have two choices. There's a way on those old Underwoods, you can slide out the whole typeset, and you can either swap out an individual, you can go buy some individual keys and replace the damaged ones. But what was more common was just to slide out the whole thing and slap in a whole new set. Now the trouble is when you do that, no one's ever going to be able to tell that was Bob Howard's machine, because now it's got a new typeset. The only way you can identify it is from the typeset. Other than that, it's an Underwood #2, and it was the most made typewriter in the world. There's millions of them.
Well, we do have stories which were not typed on the Underwood #5, and we have a few stories that were typed when he went to San Antonio in March 1931. He spent the whole month there, and he didn't bring his typewriter for whatever reason. And he did type a few stories over there, but you can still know it's him because he would make these typical spelling mistakes. He would do idiosyncrasies. It's him.
Punctuation
Punctuation things. I mean, after a while, you get to recognize those, and it was him.
Yeah.
And the Coronet typewriter dates from 1928, is that right?
The what?
Coronet typewriter.
Who's that?
We have never touched
What's
the
he
Coronet
talking about?
typewriter. So we can't officially have a position on it because we've never been examined.
Well,
somebody has.
Let me correct you. In the house, and if you see in the house, there's a letter from Coronet, and which states that the Coronet typewriter dates from 1928.
That's what we know is what he tells us. So yeah, he says it dates from
That's what he
28,
says.
yeah.
Yes, so therefore, it could not have been ours.
I don't know about that.
Until rule 1, you don't make a comment on something you haven't seen and examined yourself. How irritated do we get when people psychoanalyze Bob and they've never met him? And the first thing they teach you in that art form is you never do that. Okay, it's the same kind of thing. There's no point in making a reference to something that you haven't seen, haven't examined, don't have any basis to know about. So.
If Dr. Howard had the original typewriter, do we know what happened to it after?
We have lots of stories.
But
and 20 cents in a story will get you 20 cents because I've got.
And let me just say, I don't know anything about any of
He's
this.
a wise man.
None of it.
Yeah.
I don't know any of these names, any of these, nothing.
We
Nothing.
sort of have done.
But Glenn Lord's collection is awesome, and we should talk about it.
There you go. There you go. I mean, I've talked to a little lady that said she had it. I got to see a machine.
Just ignored me.
Well, I mean, maybe
Drive
it's the
on.
real one. I don't know. But I can't. I have no. I haven't been allowed to examine them. So I have no idea about anything. I'm not the one to have an opinion because I haven't seen. And I'm not a typewriter expert either.
But it disappeared.
How about these pages
Yeah,
that we're
it
looking
went
at?
Yeah. So wherever it went away, and we're not sure where it went. You get lots of stories. Who knows? So
Can you turn him off?
one of the other interesting
Where's the
things.
switch?
no
I don't know, there's no switch on that.
One of the other things we found was kind of interesting was. Let me mess with that. I'm trying to show how long the paper is more.
Oh, 1922, 1923.
He had a
Steve
period.
Ellison.
He had a period where he used legal length paper. I don't know where he got it from. He had a period where he typed on legal length paper.
He's working in the stenographer's office.
Maybe it's stenography. He also did a stint at a lawyer's office
Yes.
at some point. He might have gotten
Poor
some out
guy.
there because
that's earlier.
back then lawyers actually did that kind of stuff.
The bluing thing is from 1922, 1923, very early on,
Yeah,
before he was working there.
Yeah. So you see something. This is my stack of everything I've scanned. If you look at my list, it has 29,000 references in it, all of which have been typed by hand one at a time to fill in the whole spreadsheet. Gosh, that's fun. Show you something else here that we found that we thought was fun. I want to have this on here. Oh, look, he changed the name there. There's a Dorgan name change. Why did I pull this up here? I don't know why I pulled that up there. Oh, 104. That's why it's wrong page. Is why I have it on. Never mind. 104.
What was the question?
Ask question.
Did you say you had this online?
No.
Online, no.
No. Heavens no.
Sorry. Evil
This is
smile.
my stash. Yeah. So here's kind of an example of what is probably a final carbon. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
And
You can say it is.
And now
The story starts in the middle of the page.
The story
Final draft.
and that's what we saw was when you look at these Typescripts, when Bob's writing a draft, they start at the top. Okay, maybe it'll have a title, maybe it won't, but it'll start at the top. But if you go look at the library, look at the finals, they all start in the middle of the page.
Starting in mid-1933. Before that's not the case.
Yeah. So, but you know what's missing from this story?
Okay.
No title. That's not very helpful. And for whatever reason, when you go look at the finals that you see, or some of the finals, he would wait till he was completely done with this, pull the carbon out, and then when he was sure he was done with it, then he'd go back to the original and pull it in separately and put on the title, the word count, and his name. You know, so the Gin from Bear Creek by Robert E. Howard, 50,000 word count. So one of the challenges we have in life is when we look at a story that we're going to reprint is we say, is that the real title to that story? And this is the kind of stuff we find and we go, because we know about some editors, we heard about the story changes, like Red Shadows. Bob specifically mentions in a letter, the story's originally called Solomon Kane. The editor changed the title.
No, he asked me for a new title.
Asked me for a new title. Oh,
so we don't know if Red Shadows is Bob's or Ryan's.
Yeah. Or like and so we get a lot of that where we try to figure out what happened with that title there. That's one of those things. And some of them are real easy to tell. It's easy to tell as a carbon because one, of course, those line creases, you don't see a lot of those. You see these scrub marks where they tried to erase something. He erased it on the front one and then typed over it. So when you blow it, he didn't erase the carbon, he just erased the front one. So when you blow this thing up, really big, excuse me. You see that you got two things typed over each other, which when we're trying to edit books is a lot of fun. We really appreciate it. Especially does
Which
half
word
a
came
sentence.
first?
Yeah, which word's the one he meant to be the final. Especially when it's a sentence this long and two things typed over each other, and you're like, we have a lot of fun with that. Have a lot of fun with that. Questions before I go look at something else?
Was that format standard to the Klein agency or Pulp?
I think that Klein, when he became Bob's agent, asked him to present the stories in a very specific format. That's exactly when he starts beginning the story at the middle of the page and not on top as he used to do. Sign the story on top, right? Give the approximate word count, that stuff like that. And you see that after mid-1933, all the typescripts tend to be normalized, and which makes it very difficult for me to date them, because after that, it was not so as much idiosyncratic as it used to be. So, yeah, I would say Klein had a huge influence on the presentation of the final draft.
Oh, that's
you guys said that many of the stories were changed by publishers. Or did Bob have an opinion about that, or did
He
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
He hated that.
He hated it.
Yeah, but we don't know. He didn't comment on all the changes, obviously. But when he found out, he said, "Oh, this is a story by the author of the TNT Punch. I never wrote a story by that title." And it turned out that Fiction House had published a story, had sent them 5 months before. He didn't even know it was published. And they had changed the name, the characters, and whatever. And at one point,
Iron Man.
Who's I'm talking?
I don't.
Is
need
it
to
Rob
talk.
Green, by the way?
Hi.
He's really
He
smart
wrote
in his
in a
type.
letter that they had cut the guts out of what he considered his masterpiece at that time, Fight Stories. That was Jack Byrne cut the guts out of it. So when they altered his stories, he didn't like it.
No, he did not.
And
Occasionally he'd say, I'm sure they changed it for the better. And they just go on.
Yeah, there's one letter to Lovecraft in which he says, the paragraph marked in pencil are not mine. The editor changed them because they must add something to the story or something like that. It was very,
Clearly,
it's not
clearly
remarked,
snarking at it,
obviously.
What are you looking for?
Yellow. It's not showing up screen on this color well. It's hard to see. Just the screen's not showing. That shows it a little better. So Bob also had yellow paper. And it doesn't show it there. If you see the originals, they're really yellow. And he used it for copy paper. And
This is not yellow paper.
Yeah. It's,
I
but
don't
it's
think
just,
it is.
it's just,
The yellow paper is
the
copy.
The color's not doing good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
This is
see, and it would have that word copy down through it. And I guess he could buy it cheaper. You know, when you bought paper, you used the pristine white stuff, for your stuff you're going to send in, but that stuff costs money. So he went through a stretch of years, I don't know when. But
No, the pretty cool thing about this is that he bought this stack somewhere in
It's in the end, right?
December 1935. So when we have a draft, not the final draft, obviously, because he wouldn't send a copy to an editor or a publisher, but when we have a draft with copy on it, we know that this story was prepared sometime after December 1935, so within the last 6 months of his life. So it's really helpful to update the story.
Is this the same as the onion skin paper?
Oh,
That's the one.
Coming up. Next thing up, my golly, great minds and all.
You're lucky you get to digitally photograph the onion skin. I had to photocopy some of that stuff when it was
Yeah.
stapled together. It's so hard to read and photocopy.
Oh, I know. And Patrice, through all the years, he was, he was our backup plan. He spent 20 years getting Glenn to send him copies of almost everything. But Glenn would shoot it on a Xerox machine in black and white.
Yeah.
So it's almost unlegible.
It's not. Wrong.
Yeah. And so this, you can't feel it, but this is onion skin. And so it was just very thin and crinkly. And you can see how he's using it, of course, as his carbon. And you can see how it's typed on both sides. You can see the stuff on the other side to read. So this is one of the fun things that I've done for the last 4 or 5 years that, gosh, it's a lot of fun, is there was about 1,000 pages loose that weren't bundled in stories, that were just a loose page. And so you pick up a page and you look at it and it says, doesn't even have a page number, which would have been helpful. But it starts, this began with Uncle Garfield Elkins, coming up from Texas to visit, between Grizzly Run and Calder, the stage got held up, blah, blah, blah. What story does it go to? See, that's not the answer, okay? So and sometimes I'd say, Patrice, I can't figure this out. I don't know what this is. And he would have to pull it, because he can do most of these off the top of his head, I think. And I've got e-text of almost everything. So if I really got, because some of them are real easy, this is a real well-known story, and I can pick that one out. But
Let me tell you something about those pages. When I started getting photocopies from Glenn, that was I think I got the first one in 1990, so that's way back. Mm-hmm. And when I got a page like this one, and I wanted such and such story, I would get this story, and then, on the photocopy, I wouldn't notice that there was something on the back, and it's written backward. So I distinctly remember going to my bathroom, put the page in front of the glass, and then take a picture of that so I could get to read what was on the back. I mean, that was just stupid.
So
We all do things.
you see, but so Bob, and I don't know what the years were that Bob used onion skin, or was it all the time, or I'm sorry, you're supposed to know everything. I could go through endless examples, I suppose. We have, when you look at things, so if you pick a story randomly, like Three-Bladed Doom, let's go look at that real quick.
Onion skin was draft,
Yeah.
yellow paper, onion skin were draft.
Yeah,
for draft
they would use
paper.
good paper to send to the publisher, obviously.
Let's look at Three-Bladed Doom just for some fun.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah, this one is a mess.
I know, it's still almost,
Wow.
it took forever.
Short version, long version.
Yeah, there are two versions, and sorry. I don't use this laptop very often, so it's a little hinky. So one of the fun things you get is you get all these pages. You got to start putting them together, and you got to say, well, which draft does it go to? So like here's Three-Bladed Doom, and those are Glenn title cards. He would put titles on bundles he would put together, which was very helpful because he would do a lot of the, so 90%, 80-90% was kind of pre-sorted, which was very helpful. But there was a draft there that went to 33 pages, was incomplete. Here's another draft that starts at page 37. It has a few pages. Oh, and all this commentary here. These are Bates numbers, which if you're a lawyer, you know what that is. If you aren't a lawyer, you have no idea. Bates numbers are how lawyers, they have to track a bunch of documents, and they want to keep, and there might be multiple copies of the same document, but they're not sure. Every page gets a little number stamped on it. They call it a Bates number, and that's how they keep track of everything. Instead of trying to name everything and get a consistent naming price, they just give it a Bates number. So that's what I did over the course of, and I started scanning stuff 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and so I just out of hand did Bates numbers, and then wherever I do another batch, I just pick a random number to start at and do another batch. So there's not 100,000 pages or anything. The second column talks about what kind of page it is. OT is original typescript, so I actually shot it from the original typescript. There's also, you'll see some exos in here. There are Xeroxes of the originals. That some of the things, that's all we have. Glenn would get, like copies of the Junto would just be a Xerox of the original, that kind of stuff. the story, the category. Is it fiction? Is it poetry? Is it a letter? Is it a note? Is it a map? Is it a drawing? All kinds of stuff. Story title and what draft it is. And so some of these, I haven't finished sorting this one out because it's such a mess of goo, making sure I don't have pages in the wrong places. And the reason I'm sure this one starts at, oh no, this 37 is the last page, and I'll write notes out here. So this is the last page of this draft. First draft, 37 pages. Next draft goes
More.
And it was very common for Bob to roll to, he would start telling the story from the very start. He would not be synopsis, I mean, he might write a synopsis, but when he was ready to write a draft, he would hit the ground running, write the story until he started running out of gas or something. And then he would start doing, it would just dwindle down to a synopsis. Happens all the time. So. You know when you're doing exciting stuff when the crickets start getting excited about it, you know? And then one, you know, so the next draft goes, 74 is the last page of that draft. And there's and sometimes part of the fun is going, is this the last page or did he just stop here and it's incomplete? You know, you got to sort that out. But, and then he'd rewrite, and this happens all the time where he would rewrite just part of it. He would just say, you know what, I got it to here, but I don't like this ending, so I keep all this first part, I'll just rewrite the second part. And he'll do that 3 or 4 times. He did this in a bunch of his stuff. Hour of the Dragon has chunks and chunks and chunks like that mixed all through it. And then, you know, here comes, now this is one where you have the Glenn title card that came with it, said some of this. There's stuff on the back of these pages. Blood of the Gods, page 35 and 41 is on the back of pages 3 to 11, page 12, on the back of Wolves Beyond the Other. These pages are on the back of Wolves Beyond the Border, so we can find the rest of the stuff. Because Glenn had the problem, I have everything digitally. I can shoot both sides, right? So I can sort them wherever they go. Glenn had hard paper. So if one side has a Conan story and one side has a Breck Elkin story, it can only go in one bundle. And whichever one he puts it in, then the other one's incomplete, and he's got to be able to find it again. So that was why he wrote these title cards, to try to keep track of everything. Oh, what a mess. And then let's see what else we got down here. When you see the gorge and into it, it's because I was writing notes to keep track of which, if I had all these multiple drafts that weren't sorted, that I had to sort them out, and so I was keeping track of which page was which. So this one goes down to 64 before it starts dwindling. Here's another one. It's a last page, same story, 100, page 101. There's another draft. I don't know, that incomplete's an old thing. And if you notice, the other thing you'll notice if you look at this stuff, you start looking at the side over here, and you see how the numbers are sort of kind of consecutive, and there's a couple out of sequence. That's because they were somewhere else. And I found them, and I said, oh, what do they go to, where do they fit? And I finally figure out that's that missing page 28, 29 that goes into that draft. After you identify read the loose page, figure out what story it goes to, and then say, well, it's got to, how many drafts do I have of that? Oh, maybe 7. You know, which one's missing page 28? You know, try and slide it in.
When you establish a base number, would you write that on the document itself?
No, nothing gets written on documents. No.
The scan is titled that number.
Okay.
So
yeah, the scan literally is titled that number. I didn't actually write stuff on it. No, that's a good point. No, I wouldn't do that. And this one goes down to. And this is another place where he's got them bundled in different bundles. We put them back together because they were in different
Show them
places.
all those new drawings we have.
You want to see drawings? Okay.
That would be
Anyway, this
interesting.
goes like 7 drafts. You know, it goes on forever. He said show you a drawing. They pull a drawing in for you. Or you want a
Some of
map?
the questions?
That was 3-bladed Doom,
7
yeah.
drafts.
7 drafts, yeah. Well, and a lot of parts.
Well, it's not really 7 drafts because
Yeah, not
there's
7
2
full
versions of the
drafts.
story.
7 full
So-
drafts, yeah.
Do you ever read a draft, an earlier draft, and say, wow, this actually sounds better than the 5th draft?
We saw, one of the things we saw that was fascinating was, we're going through pages and pages, and I pull up a story, and it's obviously a Breck Elkin story. Or it reads like a Breck Elkin, telling a story. And he's fighting a bear and falls off the cliff with him, and lands at the bottom of the cliff, and the bear's dead, and he gets up and goes after the guy he's hunting for. Anybody remember that story? So I'm sitting there going, I don't remember that story. And I start flipping through all the Breck stories trying to figure out which one I'm forgetting, and it's not there. And so we found one page, and we found another page, and a little later we found another page, and figured out it went with it. And we finally got it back together, and what it turned out was, it was the start of the story, The Gent from Bear Creek, the short story. And he had written this version where, as part of the thing, he gets in the fight with this bear, and then he's hunting these 3 guys, and he'd gotten it almost to the end of the story, and he decided, no, I don't like this. And he just tossed it aside and started from complete scratch and wrote a completely different story. And it was just fascinating. He also did, what was the one the editor told him to rewrite the intro to? One of the El Barak or...
Oh, no, that was in 1970s.
No.
That was in 1970s. The guy,
Oh, was it?
Yeah, the short version of Three-Bladed Doom. And
okay.
whoever published that rewrote the beginning and the ending of the story.
Yeah.
But we have more famous... Sorry.
Oriental Stories, that one? Farnsworth told him to... I don't remember the name of it.
Oh, yeah, but that's when Farnsworth told him to rewrite the beginning of the story, yeah. And we have the Kirby O'Donnell just like that. We have a famous example with Phoenix on the Sword, the very first Conan story, which was rewritten from an Ansel Kinkle story. And Wright said that, okay, the first 2 chapters of the story do not click. Could you please rewrite them? And so that's what Bob did. And I thought that the original draft was really, really interesting. That the one where Conan starts drinking because he wants to forget Cimmeria. And so this was so interesting that I wanted it to be included in the book. And so it's at the end of the first Del Rey, is the first submitted draft to Phoenix on the Sword, because it's a really interesting draft.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
Okay, let's see if we can we'll look at some drawings and we'll talk about some other stuff. So we found a lot of this stuff.
When we're going through the papers in the storage unit, we didn't know half the drawings that Howard had done. And they were all bundled together. He also kept, it seemed like a whole year of schoolwork, which is all published, it's out there. He was a great doodler. I don't know if he did these during class or when he did them. I put out a book for the foundation a while ago called The Collected Drawings, just everything that had been published. And then we got access to all of this stuff, and I have to do that again, because there's probably 20 pages of drawings that we didn't know about, and odd stuff like that. A lot of fun, and it's just sitting in a box. Didn't know it existed.
There's a poem, handwritten poem sitting with one there, just like, there you go. You'll get a lot of other things we found. I won't show you examples, we need to get on with stuff, but just other things we found. We found that sometimes he numbered his pages, sometimes he didn't. Unnumbered drafts are just the most enormous pain in the tail to work with things, because you have page, if it's numbered page 28, you can go find a draft that's missing page 28 and insert it. Get an unnumbered page. You go nuts trying to figure out where it goes. And I guess that was his earlier years?
Yeah, mostly.
When you do that, you find 3 was a bad choice. He was terrible about misnumbering pages. Happened all the time. I can show you 100 examples where it'd go 19, 20, 21, 23, 24, 25. He would just skip a number or he would repeat a number. The most famous example being The Hour of the Dragon is chapter 21. Because it gets to chapter 20, he's done his thing in Stygia, he's ready to go, and the next one starts back where the big battle's getting ready to crank up. And it's chapter 22, and you ask 20 and 22, where the hell's chapter 21?
It's chapter 20. It jumps from 19 to 21.
Yeah, 19 to 21, so there's a missing chapter 20. Well, where is it? Well, when you get to see the original typescripts, the page numbering goes straight through there cleanly. He just misnumbered it. There isn't a lost chapter. So that was nice to know.
What's the first page?
Lots of stuff has no titles, drives us crazy. Lots of drafts, you saw that. You saw how they get longer as they go. Changing titles drive us crazy. The Servants, the Jewels of Guadalur was originally titled The Servants of Bit Yakin. Every draft we have is titled The Servants of Bit Yakin. Okay? But on the client's sheet, though, it was called Teeth of Guadalur.
No, it's on the list of submission.
On the list of submissions, it's titled Teeth of Guadalur. Is that because Klein changed the name or Bob changed the name? Because we don't have.
No, it wouldn't. When a story was published, Glenn, Bob would always use the title under which the story had been published.
Except for a couple examples.
Nope.
See, this is why we have fun together. We've done. There's stories about it. We'll just spend time. Some of the stuff is incredibly faint. I mean, just you can barely. There's almost nothing to read on the page. Some pages you type the same. He pulled up the page. It was so faint. He said, just type right over the same page again. So there's 2 complete separate stories typed over the same page. Those are fun to sort out. He did a lot of false starts, and we've got some examples where we'll have the carbon of a story, and then we'll have the page 21 where the original page 21 where he started typing the page, got halfway down, changed his mind, started over, and then and so the finished page 21 will be in the carbons, but this false start page will be pulled out separately. We have some of those as examples. roaming around, which is kind of cool.
We only have a few minutes left, so.
You want to talk about the book stuff?
Now, well, okay, show some stuff.
Let's show some
and if you have questions.
Yeah, I could go on for days about all this stuff. And so let me just, you said Glenn Lord collection, so I thought I'd bring a few more things. You guys want to come up and see some of this stuff, you can. Somebody other than me can say why these things are important and why they're not, because a lot of stuff I don't know. Doodle Doo to be Champion, original press clipping, or original newspaper clipping out of the Fort Worth Record in
1928.
1928. That's why I pay the money. A big envelope back from New York sent to Robert E. Howard at Box 303. It's been scratched out and it says forward to 338 Buckingham Street, San Antonio, Texas.
We want the year?
Well, what year is that? Come on.
1933.
See, I love this. It's so much fun. It's so good at this. There are a small handful of typescripts that have not gone to HRC yet that I have up here if you want to see some originals and see what they look like. And if you want to play the game with us, read a page and tell me what story it goes to. So it's a really fun game. I haven't these are the last few that haven't gone yet. So I was kind of holding back for this. Glenn had a lot of non-Howard stuff. H.P. Lovecraft. He collected everything and everybody, and he knew everybody. So everybody sent him signed copies. This is the Acolyte. Anyone want to tell me the Acolyte? This is an entire year bound. He had a local bookbindery, Emmett and Sons in Houston, who would do this for him. He has lots of examples of these. So the interior stuff is just in brilliant conditions. It's in brilliant condition. It's like, I think, 1942.
45.
This one?
It's 1945, the Acolyte, yeah.
Oh, okay. He had a lot of fanzine stuff in the 30s and 40s. The Double Shadow and Other Fantasies, Clark Ashton Smith.
June 1933.
19 when?
June 1933.
Mm-hmm. Inscribed to Glenn, because Glenn and he were good buddies, got along together. Nero and Other Poems, Clark Ashton Smith. Another extremely rare 1920s volume, inscribed to Glenn. The Shun Room, H.P. Lovecraft, Recluse Press, the bound version, which was originally done in 28. They did. Well, I tell you, see, I don't have to write anything down. I have to treat it.
This is extremely raw. You know the story. I mean, this is actually H.P. Lovecraft's first book. It was produced by a guy named W. Paul Cook in 1928, but it was never bound. So he had produced 300 sheets, and he kept those. He sat on those, and eventually they ended up at August Deleth of Arkham House, who had 100 copies bound in 1951. It's 1928. It's 11 years before The Outsider and Others. And this copy is one of the 100 copies that were made by Deleth from the 1928 sheets. It's in perfect condition. I found that last year when I was going through the stuff. Oh, wow! This is worth several $1,000s, really. I mean, it's amazing.
And it's interesting if you look inside, you can see how the old paper was cut, and they had to kind of create a binder to hold it to make the book with. It's fascinating. Of course, Glenn did always come to you a really pristine, gorgeously clean copy.
No, my copy is better.
Oh, well, I'm sure.
And that's true.
And Glenn has the original art for that, too.
Yeah. That's cool.
The Ebony and Crystal, Clark Ashton Smith, something in the 20s, right?
22.
22, yeah.
Is that the copy from Howard Payne? Yes.
Yeah.
It's got the library thing on it, yeah. The Goblin Tower.
Okay. And this came from Bob Hart's collection.
Yeah.
Because he got that from Bob's collection. 1936, I think.
Sandalwood by Clark Ashton Smith, hand pressed done thing, custom leather covers. He just made, Smith just did this himself. And I think I found one other copy of that online. You want to know what science fiction was like? This is science fiction bibliography. So of all of science fiction, Volume 1, Number 1, 1935. It might be 15 pages.
Show me that.
Everything in science fiction. So has magazines and books. It's just it's an incredible little piece. The Aeonian. What the heck is that? This has a Lovecraft story in it. Where's Bobby?
Fancy. I got a copy.
Good man. So anyway, that's 1943. Another little scarce piece. What is this?
Hester
Esther
cousin
and
or
a
nephew.
relative, unknown one.
This original photograph of his mom that I happened to come across, the original of that, you can come up and look at it if you want. And
Beachcomber's argument.
Beachcomber's argument.
The All-Around magazine.
The All-Around magazine.
That was Clyde Smith's
thing. I think
Lone
there's-
Scout tribe paper.
Yep. Yep. So
You had those, Lee.
when you go through the Glenn Lord collection, you spend a lot of time going, 'cause it's just, and it's just, and Glenn, like I said, he never made a point of writing down anything. He didn't, and as the years got by, his collection got pretty big, and he didn't necessarily spend a lot of time, cleanly sorting all the paperbacks. Or sometimes things would kind of end up in piles in various places. So it was a lot of fun to kind of get it all collected up, put it all in boxes, and then open the boxes and start working your way through it. And just you pick up one thing and you look underneath and go, oh, there it is. There's something you were looking for, and you find it again. So it was a lot of fun doing all that. Took my wife. If you want to thank anybody for sorting all this stuff out and getting all this done, go thank my wife. Because she went with me every time and helped me do all the digging and helped me do all the sorting and did a lot of the work. And did a lot of the scanning for that matter too. She did a lot of the work. So it's good to have a helper. Any last questions before I throw us out of
Do
here?
all these items belong to the foundation, or are they?
No, this is the Glenn Lord
They're on
collection.
loan from Glenn Lord?
They've been
These are on loan. Now I brought a couple bags of stuff from the Lord collection that's going to be in the auction. Now none of it's like this.
And
No.
doesn't the university in Brownwood own the Glenn Lord collection? Is
No.
that gonna be-
No.
who owns
They used to own the Doc
Oh,
Howard
oh,
collection, but that's at the
Doc-
Howard House now.
Yeah, Doc Howard gave a bunch of stuff to the University of
Really?
Brownwood, and then after
Where's the
a
gem?
year, 2 years, he went down there and they stuck it all in the basement. Water was leaking on it, and he was furious,
There was no
and so he
sense
took it all back.
at Howard Paint. They never had that.
Okay, so they don't
Doc
have any of
Howard
that
made
stuff
that
anymore.
at
It's all
Ranger.
gone.
That's over at the house.
I don't know
Yeah.
where that
It's
one
a-
went,
it's a
but that's not.
permanent loan to the house.
Yeah, okay.
But who has
They don't
Glenn
have
Lord-
that. I don't know where that
who owns
is.
Glenn Lord's stuff?
His went
That's the
over
one
there.
that is
Yeah.
photographed for Hardworks.
Any of
It
Robert
has a big
Howard's
plate.
pulp magazine collection in Glenn Lord's collection?
Well, that's the thing is, how would you know he's got, because Glenn
Unless
has
he put it
700 pulps, right? Which I'm sure everybody else has that many, but 700 pulps. How many of those were actually owned by Bob? I
A
don't know.
few. I know for a fact a few were.
A
but-
few were.
Yeah, but we don't know which ones. He told me that. Oh, he
Bob
told me
told you
that.
that?
He told me that that was stuff he got from the collection from Price or whoever. The Goblin Tower was one, and some pulls, but
Yeah, but which ones? Who knows?
but which ones? Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, I could do this for days.
That's the last question.
You
right
can
here.
Go ahead.
What are the plans for the final disposition of Glenn Lord's stuff?
Well, that's up to Lan. I think at this point there are parts of it she's going to sell off because she's not a collector and it's not her thing, and she realizes there's other people that like to have that stuff. She already donated the entire set of Typescripts, which got evaluated for donation purposes. They had to get evaluated. And they flew in a guy from Chicago who does old paper. He's real big at what he does, and we gave him the first 12,000 pages. They evaluated it at $23.6 million. So she donated that for free. She gave that away.
You gave it to the Ransom Center? Okay.
Terry Ransom Center. So I think most of the rest of the stuff she's going to sell off. She just hasn't quite got around to it yet. There's people helping kind of get that lined up to start selling it. Because it's endless, the things you can find in there. It's just the most. We have 50 boxes of just non-English Howard stuff that people sent him over the years randomly from Croatia or wherever. It's amazing. The stuff. Everybody was his friend. Everybody sent him. He has signed books from everybody inscribed to him, from Stephen King to Jack Vance to David Brenda, whoever you want to name. He's got, he knew other agents. They all liked him. He got along with all those guys, and so they would constantly. If they did a new book, they did a new Lancer book, they send him 10 of them in a wrapper. He'd take out one, leave the rest of them all clean. Do a Grant book, he'd have 8 more pristine. All of them still as new condition. You'll see some. You're going to see some.
And if you have any more questions, you can see all of us at the pavilion later.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.